Atlanta Falcons football, Ourlads Football Network, as we talk about the upcoming season with the Falcons and Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic.com. Also, of course, you can check out, actually, it's Falcoholic.com, right?
Thefalcoholic.com.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I
there
get
is
that
the
right.
Yeah.
The matters. And also host of Falcoholic, the Falcoholic YouTube channel. So you can check that out on YouTube. He's the host. And Kevin, we're almost there. The season is underway in about almost 8 days. And it's getting exciting. And especially since the last time we spoke, right around just past the draft, the Falcons have been making some nice upgrades on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm sure the fans are starting to get a little excited here.
Yeah, well, one of the things we talked about on the post-draft show was Penix is interesting. It's a big gamble, but what are we going to do about the defense? Because they didn't take an edge rusher. They didn't take another safety. Cornerback 2 still kind of a question. At least they have some guys they seem to like there competing, but now it took all the way basically until last week, but we do finally have some answers at edge rusher and at safety with the Falcons, getting these two big moves done. I'm sure that'll be a big topic that we'll get to today, but definitely a lot of excitement after those moves, because again, that sort of solidifies two of the biggest question marks on the roster.
Yeah, let's actually start. We might as well pop up the Ourlads Atlanta Falcons depth chart page, and let's start, of course, we should on defense with those two additions. You see him here, of course, Justin Simmons at safety and Matthew Judon on edge. And matter of fact, I was doing a show on the Playbook Experts YouTube channel that I produce, and we were doing the awards predictions. We had all the panel of these big-time handicappers, and I said, okay, give me a one per award, one pick. And so there's about 5 or 6 of them. And for the Comeback Player of the Year award, one of our panelists chose Matthew Judon at 50-1 as his Comeback Player of the Year. So that was a bold pick, but it makes sense, because we know how talented he is. We know he didn't have the year he wanted last year, and he's going to get all the opportunity in the world to be the man this year in Atlanta.
Yeah, he's going to get the opportunities, no doubt. And he was on a hell of a pace to start last season too, with 4 sacks in 4 games.
Yeah,
it really, obviously getting to that age where you're a little bit nervous about signing a long-term extension, but that's kind of the weirdest thing, is that he wanted out of New England, probably for multiple reasons, but the stated reason was he wants out of New England because he's looking for an extension. He's only making 6 point something, against the cap this year. And the New England wasn't willing to do it because they're in the middle of a rebuild. They're not sure if they want to commit long-term, whatever. So when he's traded, the assumption is, of course, he's looking for an extension. And that's, allegedly why the Bears got out. I don't really believe that the Bears didn't want to give him an extension. Shows up to Atlanta, is asked, okay, are you going to get an extension? He was like, maybe not. I don't really care. I feel like I got to earn it. So whatever. That's just such a rare attitude, and kind of just goes against what you typically see. So it obviously is great for the Falcons to get, I don't think there's a better value at edge rusher other than maybe guys on rookie contracts than Matthew Judon at like $6.7 million for a season. That is an absurd value against the cap. And that's part of the draft compensation, right? A lot of people would say, oh, trading a 3rd round pick for a 1-year rental, that's kind of rich. But when you consider the cap savings that you're getting, New England absorbed a significant amount of his cap hit this year because it was prorated signing bonus. So, it makes a lot of sense. And let's be honest, Falcons haven't been doing great with those 3rd round picks anyway. So maybe we just trade them for veterans, and that ends up being the better use of those picks. But, Judon, I still don't think the edge room is great or anything, but Judon coming in makes it not this screaming red alert flag that it was before. Whereas if you have Judon on one side, it's like, okay, you have Judon, the interior was going to be really good. And that was sort of the only hope that we had was, well, you've got Onyemata, you got Jarrett. Apparently Taquan Graham is all the way back. He's been basically the third starter in 3-4 looks, which was a big surprise to me because I left him off my initial roster projection because I was like, well, last year, he was still hurt and it didn't look great. And who knows what the new staff thinks, but he's all the way back. He's a starter. They love the guys they have. They're probably going to keep 7 or 8 interior guys because they have so many good ones. They drafted 2. Arroyo and Dorless have both flashed in the preseason. So they have a super deep, very good interior. So really, you can probably get away with having one good edge rusher and not having this incredible force on the other side. So I think what the Falcons are going to do is they're probably going to put a big run defender on one side and Judon on the other and hope that gives them good run defense. And then they can rotate in Arnold Ebiketie as their designated pass rusher across from Judon when they need to, which is a role he was productive in last year in less than 200 snaps. But obviously you hope for better than that and more snaps. But overall, it's not the terrifying problem that it was just a week ago. And I think given the value you're getting him at, you have to feel super happy about that. And yeah, at 50-1 on Judon, I mean, look, he's been the defensive player of the year, like not that long ago. So, and it's a biceps tear. That is not an injury that is typically going to be a problem going into the next year. It's not a lower body injury. He's been able to condition the whole time. Apparently he's ready to go. So it's not necessarily an injury that you'd worry like is going to impact his performance this year. Really, it's just the age 32 season that I think is giving people some pause. But we've seen plenty of edge rushers continue to perform at a high level at 32. So,
absolutely. Just look at Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I mean, Atlanta, we knew going into the offseason that this was going to be a big offseason with the money that Atlanta had. So, and I'm pretty sure they still have money. So, if Judon were to perform well, they'll pay him, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could. They're going to be in cap constraints going forward now because of the Terrell extension. I think 2025 is going to be their tightest year in terms of the cap. And I think this is more of a meta conversation. I think their overall strategy is to not sign a bunch of people next year and try to cash in on as many comp picks as they can. Start to go more towards the Baltimore mold because they're going to be really tight. Then in 2026, the idea would be to either trade Cousins or move on and go to the cheap Penix deal for the next couple of years. And then maybe you can bring in some guys to maximize that 26, 27 window. But we'll have to see how it plays out. That's pretty far in the future. But I think Fontenot has always talked about wanting to base his GM strategy off of Ozzie Newsome. That's his guy. He's not basing it off of, the Saints strategy. That's never been his thing. And now I think we're starting to see with these 1-year deals, Justin Simmons is also a 1-year deal. They have the opportunity to re-sign these guys, but if Judon and Simmons have good deals, they let them walk. That's possibly 2 third-round comp picks coming your way. So, I think that's what they want, is to start collecting these extra picks, and maybe they'll end up trading those picks for other guys too in the future. But I think they want to start moving to that strategy. And I think these 1-year deals are a way to do that. I also would not be at all surprised if they just give Judon a deal, like midway through the season or something like that. But they can do whatever they want. They can do it next year. They can do it not at all. They can see what he gets on the open market and try to match. But yeah, it's going to be a tight cap next year, but they honestly haven't really started to stretch their cap at all. I mean, the only thing they really did was to restructure Chris Lindstrom. That's the only restructure they've done out of like 6 or 7 they had available. So they're keeping a lot of the cap clean. And I think the Falcons, notably, we'll see if it changes after cuts, depending on who gets cut. But I believe they have the lowest or second lowest dead money in the league, only 3 years after having an NFL record dead money hit. The year that they moved on from Matt Ryan and stuff like that. So Fontenot has basically been the anti-Mickey Loomis, completely cleaning the cap up over the last couple of years. And the Falcons were now in a situation this year where they could finally do all the necessary moves to put them in contention. And now we just have to actually see that, work.
All right. Well, it is cut down day. So are there any cuts that are going to be really tough ones? And also, are there any fringe players, veterans that you've been surprised about that are trying to make it hard on the staff, or maybe even a college free agent that wasn't drafted that is going to try to make the team and make it hard to cut?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a UDFA that makes it this year. There may be UDFAs from last year that do. But the Falcons brought in a lot of veterans, and they just have a lot of draft picks. The one position that's just an absolute bloodbath is that interior defensive line, where I think we could see like all of these guys end up on rosters. All of the guys on the Falcons depth chart. That was consistently the best group in preseason and camp. And there's going to be some legitimately difficult cuts there. Whereas guys like, Contavious Street, who has played like 7 snaps in the preseason and had 5 pressures and a sack, and guys like, they're obviously going to keep Rukaroro, the second rounder, but he may be buried on the depth chart just because the depth is so good. And, they drafted 3 defensive tackles with Rook and Brandon Dorless and Zion Logue. And Logue is probably going to have to go to the practice squad. LaCale London was a huge contributor for them last year after Grady Jarrett went down. He's probably not going to make it. So that group is, and Eddie Goldman. Eddie Goldman's back. He's probably gonna make the roster as their nose tackle. It took 3 tries to get Eddie Goldman through training camp, but better late than never. Yes. Apparently he's in, and the Falcons hired a former Bears coach that he apparently was very familiar with, and maybe that was the secret to getting Eddie Goldman through the Georgia sun in July. But I think the interior defensive line is definitely a bloodbath. And then we'll see, at receiver, Falcons have had some injuries there. They lost Rondale Moore for the season. Then they signed Jakeem Grant as kind of like let's see if we can get some Rondale Moore things out of Jakeem Grant. He practices twice, and then he's out for the season.
Oh, it's time for him to retire.
Yeah, but apparently he's actually okay. They did an injury settlement, so theoretically he'll be able to play somewhere else. But I think they got enough of a whiff of that injury history.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so it was kind of like, okay, let's see, they like Casey Washington, the rookie. He's been impressive, but, let's see who can, we're probably going to have to get our wide receiver 6, type guy, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 4 type guy on the waiver wire. But Chris Blair, who was with the team all last year, as well as like a practice squad guy, he had the most yards of anyone in the preseason. He had almost 100 yards in a game with Taylor Heineke as his quarterback, which is no small feat. So I don't think there's a screaming need for that last receiver now. I still think, given what we've seen already hit the market at wide receiver, that unfortunately Blair's probably going to be sacrificed for if they can convince Noah Brown to come here, for example. I can't imagine they would keep Blair over Noah Brown.
Sure.
But I think Blair has shown enough that you're fine with that. But, the Falcons, I think at wide receiver is where they could probably use that upgrade still.
Yes.
For that wide receiver 4 type guy, if they can find one. But, Noah Brown's probably going to get some kind of decent contract, given how kind of everyone needs wide receiver help except the Texans, apparently. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But corners deep too. Kevin King, also another player sort of back from the scrap heap of not playing for several years. He's not only played, he was like the player of the game in the first preseason game. He had a pick and another near pick. He was playing some safety last week as well. It seems like he's a guy they just want to get out there. And then Natrone Brooks has kind of been like the defensive player of training of the preseason. He's undersized, but has played terrific ball. They actually are going to have some tougher cuts here for the first time in quite a while on this roster. They've the offensive line is basically unchanged from last year. I think they're going to keep the exact same 8 guys that they had. Okay. So that's always a nice thing when you can keep that going. There's a lot of questions. Will they keep Taylor Heineke? Will they be able to trade him, or will they just cut bait? I don't know. My prediction of, Michael Penix will be QB2 by the end of camp that was settled weeks ago.
Okay.
Taylor Heineke is not.
Is that deserved? Does he deserve that, or was that just more of because again, Heineke, we've seen him play. He's played well at times. He's clearly more experienced. Is this more of a talent thing, or is this more of, well, he is our first round draft pick, so he does need to play, even though he may not be ahead of Heineke right now?
I think he's ahead of Heineke right now, straight up.
Cool.
I think Heineke's first preseason game it looked like he didn't want to be here. That was how bad it was.
Okay.
And then the next 2 games, it was better. But he did. I don't think he took the Penix thing well. But the Falcons guaranteed his contract. So I don't know what I mean, he took a pay cut, but they guaranteed him like $4 million. So it's like,
Nothing wrong
can't
with
be too
that.
upset. Otherwise you're going to get cut and get like 2. So, I mean, the Falcons did him a solid in my opinion, but, he has not been inspiring. And I think his like attitude fits what this team wants. Like, he likes to go big and take the shots, which is kind of what Penix likes to do, but his arm is just like a shadow of Penix. So it's like they can't really do all the same things. Heinicke wants to do the same things. He's got the attitude, but unfortunately the physical deficiencies that Heinicke has that's why he's not a starter, and that's why Penix was drafted in the top 10. So no, Penix has been impressive. You can tell that it was probably wise to bring in Kirk Cousins if they really wanted to compete this year, just because Cousins is just, he looks like the pro that he is, right? He's making all the right reads, hitting all the receivers, pinpoint accuracy. You don't really have any concerns other than you just hope he doesn't get hurt. Penix is the flashy guy. Like the preseason game showed pretty much what Penix is. He only played that, 3-4 drives, hit this beautiful deep bomb, just was crushing these throws outside, was able to navigate pressure, was able to get to his third read on some stuff. And then just had some accuracy issues sometimes, just a little bit, iffy with some throws, not like Ritter accuracy problems where that's off and inside and now it's picked. It was more like over the head, just out of bounds, like stuff that's like, okay, you can deal with some of that. But those type of growing pains, I think, would probably cost the Falcons some games this year. Whereas if you have Kirk to get you through, I think the Falcons just wanted to make the playoffs. They wanted to make sure they were going to make the playoffs because the fans are pissed. The fans are like, we're not putting up with any more losing, right? Like we can't do another rebuild. So I think, Cousins looks exactly as advertised. I don't know I know where this rumor started, Pro Football Talk. But like Cousins is not hurt. Cousins has been full go since the beginning of training camp. He's 100% cleared.
What rumor are you talking about?
I think on PFT, Florio and Chris Sims were talking about the Falcons were benching Penix because actually Kirk Cousins is secretly hurt and is not going to be able to play week 1. There's absolutely no truth to that. That is a complete fabrication.
Wow.
Honestly, I mean, it's speculation is what it was, but I have to tip the cap because they not only speculated on their own show, then they reported the rumor in an article that they started. So honestly, tip the cap to the gall of that one. That's some top tier shit posting there, but
I know exactly how you feel with Mike Florio.
This is top tier stuff right there. But I mean, it's completely untrue. The truth about the preseason stuff is Raheem Morris just doesn't value the preseason as
apparently not
a practice. He doesn't value it as practice.
I hear you.
They view it as, I don't agree. I think it's very valuable practice, but they view it as an evaluation situation for their depth players, not something that they want starters and second stringers playing in because they think the injury calculus is too high. I view it as important practice for guys, and I'm willing to roll the dice on injuries, and probably means I would get burned by that sometimes. But we'll have to see. If they start really slow, then we're probably going to be mad. But other than Rondale Moore, they've done a good job at sort of ushering the roster through training camp without a ton of attrition. So hopefully that'll work out for them. But yeah, that's sort of where they stand right now with the Penix Heinicke thing. And I wouldn't be shocked if they just let Heinicke go and they bring in another quarterback 3.
Desmond Ritter?
He's available, right?
I heard that. Yes. Imagine that.
Poor Ritter.
Is there any bad ties?
I mean, I mean, they traded him for a receiver. So, I mean, there's not any bad ties, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, speaking of getting off to a slow start, see, that's the thing that I look at when we were going over our predictions. And we're doing our NFL predictions on this channel here on Ourlads. We're doing that on Thursday morning at 9:30. Ryan Dunleavy from the New York Post is going to join me and Mark Lawrence from Playbook Experts, and we're going to preview the season. And we did a little of that on Mark's Playbook Experts YouTube channel. And when we were doing that and going and getting all the expert opinions and so forth, one of the things that I actually pointed out with Atlanta was, and we'll talk about this. We've talked about this already, of course, which is the big scheme changes they're going through. So I was like, well, combine the big scheme changes with the fact that you've got a quarterback coming off a major injury. And then also, if you just take a look at the schedule for Atlanta, you have to start the season with 3, really good organizations, Pittsburgh, Philly, and the Kansas City Chiefs. and even 2 division games, which could be tough, even though they're at home, the Saints and the Bucks. So that's a pretty, it's not an easy start to the season. So you do wonder, see, if you're a Tampa Bay or New Orleans fan, or let's even throw Carolina in there, if you have any aspirations of beating the Falcons out, because Vegas says Atlanta is the favorite in the NFC South. So if you have any aspirations of doing that, you have to catch Atlanta early, I guess is my point. Because if Atlanta can get off to a good start this year with all these little potential obstacles in the way, then they're going to be in great shape the rest of the year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this first month is going to be tough. I mean, there's no way around it. But the Falcons' schedule the last month and a half is potentially one of the easiest stretches in the NFL.
Yes.
So they could stack up 5-6 wins in the last 6 games if they're rolling by then. Which we've said that a lot with Atlanta, and that's never really happened. So we're still in wait and see mode in terms of how much faith we actually have. Obviously, the vibes are really good right now, which is a nice change. But yeah, I mean, I think the Falcons are probably going to start 1-2. And if that happens, I'm not going to panic. If they lose to the Steelers and go 0-3, that's a big problem. They can't. I think just the optics of losing to Arthur Smith's Steelers, who were probably the worst team in preseason, would be terrible. It also wouldn't be that shocking, considering this is the first time for this staff together with a new quarterback and new everything. It could be really sloppy. They didn't play in the preseason, but they got to find a way to win that game. And then if you win that game and you go 1-2, not a big deal.
No,
you just have to beat the Saints at home in week 4. No matter what, you got to beat the Saints at home in week 4. You got to get that dub. And as long as you beat the Saints in week 4, even if you started 0-3, it's going to be okay. If they go 0-4, then we're talking about this.
Oh no, they're not going 0-4.
I don't think they're going 0-4. No. But I think that I think you're hoping for 2-2 in the first 4, and if that's the case, you're feeling great.
You're set.
Because and the Bucks, I do still respect the Bucks as a potential winning team. I think they're going to have a hard time getting more than 9 wins, but they're definitely the second best team in the division. And that, I don't think they got significantly worse in any way. I think that they just didn't take a big step forward. And I think you're always concerned about the Baker coaster going down again. Because if you look at his career, last year was exactly the same thing that you would expect if you looked at his career trajectory. Good year, bad year, good year, bad year, good year, bad year. And Dave Canales is no longer there. And I think Dave Canales, to his credit, figured out that the run game was going to be terrible, knew he had to commit to it, but just basically set up the passing game to do exactly what Baker wanted. And I don't know that Liam Cohen's going to do that. I think Liam Cohen's going to run his system. And I'm not sure if I think Baker's going to regress. I don't think there's any way he plays as well as he did last year. That doesn't mean he's going to be bad.
Yeah.
But I think they're gonna have a hard time replicating that. A lot of the team leaders are a year older. The secondary in Tampa Bay is very concerning. Other than, Anton Winfield, great, obviously, but I think that secondary is a big problem area. So I think the Bucks are probably going to win 8-9 games again and be a very solid team. But I just think they're not. They just don't have the upside. I think that you look at that team as sort of a solid team. I think the Saints are going to bottom out this year. I think this is the year for that. I've been saying that every year. I am a hater, yes. But, this year I mean it. Okay.
You mean you don't believe in Dennis Allen? Come on now.
Yeah, I can't believe they didn't fire him. Yeah, I think the Falcons probably ushered this in by giving Dennis Allen that win. And it was the Saints thought they won that game. But
I like that.
They lost in the end.
I think Carolina is going to be better. I really do. The problem is they were so bad. So
yeah, I mean, I think they could get to 6 wins. I think they'll take a step forward, but they got a lot that needs to gel and get better there. And there's just so much, that they have to overcome. But I think that, I think it's going to be the Panthers and Saints fighting for last place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Saints because that offensive line is fire alarm red alert bad. And I feel so bad for Ryan Ramczyk. Legitimately one of the best right tackles in the league, now having to possibly medically retire. I mean, that is devastating. So that forces them to have to move Talisi Fuaga to left tackle, where he's not really very experienced as a rookie. I love Talisi Fuaga, but I was like, if they're putting him at right tackle, I think he'll be a plug and play guy. Now you got to move to the left side.
Yeah.
And play left tackle as a rookie in the NFL when the rest of that offensive line is already really sketchy. And then they're playing Trevor Penning at right tackle, who was quite possibly the worst pass protecting tackle in the NFL. So, and Derek Carr's a statue. So that's all going to work out great, I'm sure. I'm a Saints hater. We could have another separate pod for Saints hate,
okay.
but yeah,
I agree. I
all that to
expect them
say,
to have
yeah,
a
that
bad season.
the Falcons are going to have to fight the Bucks, and I think the Bucks again are solid, but I think the Falcons split with the Bucks, and they could possibly sweep everyone else. So, this is the opportunity is there for this Falcons team to run away with this division.
Yep.
I do think the Bucks will keep it interesting for a while, but I think in that last stretch, that last 6-game stretch, we could see the Falcons pull ahead with all those easy games. Theoretically, we'll see. But.
Well, that's the thing too, because Tampa Bay's schedule is actually pretty decent to start. So they need to take advantage of that. And the Falcons, that's why I was saying if Tampa Bay has any chance, they've got to take like a 2-game lead early in the division. If they don't, if it's neck and neck after September, then this is Atlanta's division for sure. And Kirk Cousins, you've already given us the heads up, the thumbs up there. So let's take a look at the rest of the skill positions. And again, the wide receiver situation is very important. We were talking about the scheme changes, and this is what we're talking about because they're going from Arthur Smith's offense, which, all right, we got 2 guys. Well, we have one elite receiver. That's all we need. We got a second guy like Van Jefferson, a guy like that we brought in. Okay, we want him to block, and that's about it. Everybody else we don't care about. But now, I guess they're going to run 3 receivers, a lot of 11 personnel. I don't know. I mean, we've never seen this offensive coordinator coordinate before, but I'm assuming that that's the plan. And right now, you look at the depth chart, and you've got 2 legitimate starters, and everything else is a little bit of a question mark unless you believe Ray McLeod can be a lot better than people think.
Ray he'll be okay. He'll be fine. He'll be like a league average wide receiver 3, I think, which is probably more than most people think. But
probably
he's fine. He's looked pretty good in camp as that 3rd receiver. They're not going to ask a ton of him. They're going to ask him to be the 3rd, like the 5th or 6th target, basically. What is interesting is that I think a lot of people look at the preseason stats in particular. The Falcons are lying this preseason. They are absolutely lying to everyone.
Okay.
They're going to play a lot of 11, way more than they did before, but I think they're going to be close to the league lead in 12 personnel because they're going to use Kyle Pitts as their 11th, as their 3rd receiver, essentially. Like Kyle Pitts will be the guy instead of Ray McLeod. And they really like Charlie Werner's blocking. So they want Charlie Werner to be in line, and they want Kyle Pitts out there as much as possible. So it will technically be 12, but it's effectively 11 because Kyle Pitts is probably going to be your slot receiver on a lot of plays.
That makes sense.
They're still going to run way more 11 than Arthur Smith did, but that's why I'm not as concerned about like Ray McLeod, because I think probably a decent chunk of the time is just going to be 2 tight ends.
By the way, is that only because of Moore's injury?
No. Ray McLeod was ahead of Moore.
He was. Okay.
Yeah. And Moore had some injuries in like the OTAs and stuff like that, but he was back for the beginning of camp and he never got ahead of Ray. He was climbing the chart back to kind of being that wide receiver 4. And they definitely wanted to use him as like a gadget player and stuff like that. I think he was going to get plenty of work in that role, but I don't know that he was going to surpass Ray for wide receiver 3. I think Ike Hilliard, a lot of people don't know this. The Falcons got the former Steelers wide receivers coach, Ike Hilliard, to come to Atlanta, who is famous for developing a ton of wide receivers. He loves Ray McLeod. Apparently he was like, I think this guy's really underrated, all this stuff. So he, I think, is responsible for the McLeod-assance, coming into Atlanta. But also he's actually known as a guy that develops receivers, unlike Arthur Smith. So hopefully some of these other guys we've seen come through will continue to develop as well. I know there's a lot of excitement around Casey Washington and like Dynasty. They do really like him. I wouldn't expect anything this year, but they do really like him. And, Darnell Mooney, I think he's a very capable wide receiver too. They paid him a lot of money. And I think they're going to use him extensively as like probably the 3rd target. And I think he's the take the top off guy, but they're not just going to pigeonhole him into that like Scotty Miller role. They're going to use him all over the place. We've seen a lot of interesting route combinations and things with him, just using his natural separation. And Mooney's going to be the guy that gets the one-on-one coverage most of the time because Drake London's going to require a lot of attention. He's probably going to get 150 plus targets. Drake London is going to dominate this year now that he actually has someone that will throw the ball within his zip code. And the same thing with Kyle Pitts. Like I think Pitts is going to be the number 2 target. They're going to find ways to get him involved. But Darnell Mooney, Kirk Cousins asked for Darnell Mooney specifically after he signed, and the Falcons were like, okay, we'll get it done. And, he's here. They paid him a lot, but I think he is very legitimately going to be the number 3 target. And the idea, I think, is that he's the take the top off guy, the guy that's probably going to get like one-on-one. And when Mooney's had opportunities to get one-on-one coverage, like his first year in Chicago, his 1,000-yard season, he was not considered this giant threat. So he kept getting all these one-on-one looks, and he absolutely dominated in that role. So now coming to Atlanta, hopefully he'll get back into that opportunity again. But I think the Falcons are fine with this wide receiver room. You would have loved to see them really gone out. Like I would have loved Rome Odunze to this room. That would be terrifying. But we'll see. I mean, they're trying to get quarterback squared away for the foreseeable future. If that works, then we're just going to have to be like, well, I would have loved Latu or Rome Odunze, but you got your franchise quarterback. If the quarterback, if it's not the right quarterback, then we're going to have a lot of conversations about, wow, we just missed out on. So we probably won't be able to answer that for a while. But
okay,
yeah, I don't have a big problem with the wide receiver room. I know some people seem to.
So do you think that they'll add another receiver outside the organization during these cuts then?
Given who's been cut already, yeah. I mean, I would try to get Noah Brown here. Yeah. As soon as if you can figure out a way to make that work. They do have about $7 million after the AJ Terrell extension to play around with, so they could probably give him a decent deal. I think Ben Skronik, if they want to get a guy that's familiar with the offense in here, he was cut by the Texans.
So wow, that's surprising.
Okay. So he could potentially be someone they like. Just as someone. I mean, I think Chris Blair. Like I was expecting just like them to just go out. Chris Blair's been like legitimately interesting, but I think he's going to have a hard time. Like if they can get Noah Brown or Ben Skronik, it's like, okay, I'm not sure he's going to be able to, he'll probably be a practice squad guy, but yeah, I mean, I think they're going to look, I think they were in on the John Mechie talks. I don't have any like intel on that, but it seems like the Texans have decided to keep Mechie given that they're waiving receivers. So, I think Noah Brown would be the guy I circle as like if they want to go out and get someone that can compete with Ray or like it boost sort of the depth of this receiving group in a big way, then I would do that, or possibly Ben Skronik as well.
Does that mean that Hodge is going to make the team based on special teams?
Yeah, Hodge has been pretty set. He got kind of the key depth treatment in the preseason. He only played a handful of snaps. So I think they liked Hodge a lot. I think they view him as a versatile inside-outside guy, so they like his ability to back up pretty much any receiver spot, and he's arguably their best gunner. So I think they're perfectly fine keeping him. And then Casey Washington will be on there too. And then it really, how you stack it depends on who they get. If they keep Chris Blair, probably, Casey Washington is like the 4th receiver, or Darrell Hodges. But if they get like a Noah Brown, then you're just going to push those guys down. Sure. And Noah Brown's probably going to slot in a little higher, but we'll see how it shakes out. I'm sure Brown's going to have suitors. So.
Absolutely. All right. Backfield. No changes. Everything looks good. Avery Williams, how's he coming along?
Quietly. I mean, he's going to be one of their returners. It seems like they've basically given him again that treatment where he didn't really play in the preseason. So I think that he's safe as, one of the 4 running backs they're going to keep, and he's going to be one of their returners. He does seem to be healthy. He hasn't missed any time.
Okay.
But really the open question is like, is it going to be rookie Jace McClellan or second-year guy Carlos Washington Jr. making it? I just keep waffling back and forth on this. Neither one was like super duper impressive in preseason. Jace had to work his way back from injury, so that could be part of it. So you probably think they lean towards Jace at the end of the day because he's the rookie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one's, we're talking about RB4 probably. So, they could also look, I know like Kenny Nwangwu from Minnesota just got waived. So like, if they could get him in here, then absolutely. They'll probably go that route, but we'll see how it shakes out. I do think they it's pretty straightforward. And all this stuff about Bijan and Algier splitting carries, I wouldn't believe that. I think that, again, I think the Falcons are lying to people intentionally. Like they were like the team with the least usage of motion and like pre-snap stuff. That is not going to happen. That is absolutely not going to happen. They're like entirely 11 personnel. That's not going to happen. So like this team is lying on purpose. So I think this talk about Bijan and Algier are going to split carries. It's going to be like 75% Bijan at least, I think. And then they're going to play a lot of 12. So, don't believe the lies that they're showing everywhere. They literally did not run a single red zone passing play that was not a fade. So that's how little they're trying to show anyone in this preseason. So that was a frustrating watch in the preseason, but they're clearly committed to this bit of just not revealing anything about what they're going to do. So
yeah, the preseason is starting to get aggravating. The offensive line, we know how strong they've become and healthy relatively. So if anybody were to get hurt, though, how's the depth?
I think they love Ryan Newsel as their primary interior guy. He's been really good. Like the second team offensive line against the Dolphins, Newsel was out with like a calf strain for that game. It looked really bad. Newsel comes back the next week. It looks so much better. I think not only is he a better like blocker than Javon Gwynn, who's sort of like the third center, probably gonna be a practice squad guy. I think he's like a good center. Like he knows the calls. He gets the offensive line on schedule. When he had to play last year for a game or two, the offensive line didn't take a step back. So I think that they love him. So he's definitely there. And then I think they really, really like Storm Norton as their swing tackle. They claimed him from the Saints at the beginning of last year. Norton had to come in for 3 games, graded out as a above average tackle. So when anytime you can get a swing tackle that's an average NFL tackle, you're really happy with that because those guys typically aren't cheap and Norton's not making a ton of money. So I think they feel really good about their first 2 depth guys. I think after that it gets a little sketchier. I think Kyle Hinton is a guy that they like as like a veteran. He's not amazing, but he's fine. And then it's sort of between like, I think they're probably only going to keep 8 to start the year because they're going to keep like so many interior defensive linemen. They got to make cuts somewhere. But, Julian Davenport, in terms of his ability to, back up guard and tackle, he's probably going to be a prime practice squad guy. I think they like what they've seen from Andrew Stuber as well, as another potential practice squad guy. And then Javon Gwynn, I think they like, but he just hasn't flashed. When he had to come in for Newsel with the second team offensive line, it was not great. He's just really undersized. I think it's going to be really tough for him in the NFL.
What does the backup tight end situation look like? Is it a seamless 1 through 3 or 4, or are there jobs on the line here, positions on the line?
I think Ross Dwelly is the third tight end, but I don't know if they're going to keep 4 tight ends because again, like the Rams keep 3, and that's what they typically done because they're so 11 heavy. But again, like I said, I don't know the Falcons are going to be as 11 heavy as it appears.
Okay.
So I think if they keep 4, John Fitzpatrick will make it. He's had a solid preseason. But ultimately, I think they'll probably just keep 3 tight ends, and then they'll keep Fitzpatrick on the practice squad. And if they need to elevate him for a game, they can. And they'll probably try to again use those roster spots elsewhere. But yeah, I think Ross Dwelly seemingly has locked up that third tight end job.
All right, on defense, you talked about that interior. By the way, so Graham, you have him as a starter. Is that say more about Graham than less about Harrison?
Yeah, I mean, I think Harrison, they're playing as an edge and a defensive, like an interior guy. They're moving him around. So I think Harris, it's kind of like, it's hard to sort of sort the depth chart. Like I have him listed like as an edge defender technically, for like math purposes, but he's going to play both. And he's probably going to be like one of their primary guys. Like I think on base downs, we're going to see a lot of Zach Harrison as this beefy, like we're going to stop the run guy. And then the opposite will be like on third downs, we're going to see Ebiketie come in for him. And I think they'll mix in Zach Harrison on the interior as needed as well. I think Taquan is, he's probably going to be one of the defensive ends, in those packages. I think the 3-4 is a much better fit for him, which is probably why he's back in the starting lineup. And I'm really excited for him because again, I had him not making the team in my first roster projection before camp. And he really flashed back in 2022 before he got hurt. I mean, he was looking like, wow, this might be one of the best rotational guys in the league. We're actually getting something out of him. Gets hurt, misses the entire rest of that season. Doesn't quite look like himself in 2023. now this year, hopefully back fully healthy. So I think he's definitely at the top, like the number 3 spot based on what we've seen. And then, I think Eddie Goldman's going to be their run stuffer, like at nose tackle. I'm not sure he's going to be active every week. They'll probably activate him for like really run head. Like they're going to activate him for the Steelers game. But and he's probably going to start in the Steelers game. But other than that, I think he'll be a guy that they activate as needed for like run heavy opponents.
Okay.
Like him and Contavious Street, will probably rotate depending on what they actually need there. But yeah, I mean, we could see like Ruka Roro and Brandon Dorlus sort of be inactive for the first bit. And it's not that they've been bad. It's just that all the guys ahead of them have been playing really well. Like Eddie Goldman's back. Contavious Street was dominant in the preseason. Taquan Graham is apparently back as well. So like, Rook and Brandon Dorlus will probably just be depth guys to start the season. And
could they make if they were going to make a player trade for a receiver, let's say a depth receiver, could they trade one of the veteran defensive tackles for a receiver?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of buzz this afternoon that teams are calling about veteran defensive tackles. So I could see them moving Contavious Street based on his incredible. I mean, it was like 8 snaps, but it was like 5 pressures in a set. So, maybe they could convince someone to send a day 3, like a 5th or 6th rounder for him. Yeah, that could make the roster math a little bit easier. But otherwise, I don't think they're really looking to move any of these guys. I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I think, ultimately, you're really looking more at like edge as like, okay, how's this going to shake out? I think they like Lorenzo Carter's versatility. He is that guy that's like a super athlete. He can drop in coverage, which we know the Rams defense liked to do a lot last year. He can play with his hand in the dirt. He can play standing up. He's probably going to be their like rotational guy / starter opposite Judon. And then really it's going to be like Arnold Ebiketie as a designated pass rusher and maybe Zach Harrison as like a, early down guy, with Zach Harrison probably mixing in and like inside stuff like NASCAR type packages or whatever when they're having a bunch of interior guys out there. But it's definitely and then I think like deep down, like it seems like they're going to go with James Smith-Williams as like their deep reserve just because he's a veteran, really good run defender. D'Angelo Malone, the former 3rd rounder, he's been their best special teams player of the preseason. Like he has like 5 special teams tackles in the preseason.
Okay.
But again, like I don't know if that's enough to get him on the roster. It certainly helps his case, but he didn't really do much on defense. And I think like given, their weakness at edge, they can't really afford to keep a special team edge player. Maybe if they list him as more of like a linebacker, they could get away with it. But so we'll see.
That's not why they drafted him. So,
yeah.
And we also talked about the strength of the interior, that linebacker position, thanks to Anderson coming back and drafting Bertrand. So I got to assume all 4 of those guys are going to be playing every week.
Yeah, I think those are the 4 linebackers. I don't think they're going to keep more than that. I right now, Caden Ellis and Nate Landman are dealing with like day-to-day injuries. It doesn't sound like there's any week 1 concern given how much time we have. But we could, if we see some linebacker additions, it could be because they're a little bit more concerned. But Troy Anderson's back. Don't really know what to expect from him in terms of is he going to be starting or rotating. Yep. But I think between Caden Ellis, Nate Landman, and Troy Anderson, they have a really good 3 deep. And I think JD Bertrand again, he's going to need time. He's a little undersized. But they like that group a lot. And I think that's sort of an underrated group on this roster. I think they would really like to use Caden Ellis more as an edge rusher, like a rotational edge rusher, a blitzer. That's why they signed it. That's why they give him the big money, because he had 8 sacks as a blitzer. So they want to do that. They want to do a lot of sim pressure stuff. They want to have Caden Ellis rotating down, but they need Anderson to be able to play Mike for that to happen. They can't afford to, like, Nate Landman's a super good, like, sort of weak side linebacker, can go make the tackles, that sort of stuff. But in coverage, you can't really trust him to carry guys.
Yeah.
He can't cover a lot of ground. Anderson is, of course, that prototype, like, Fred Warner do-it-all linebacker. He just doesn't have the mental stuff that obviously Fred Warner has. That's part of why he's such an amazing player. But he's had an entire extra year to sort of get immersed in the playbook, more immersed in linebacker. And, by all accounts in training camp, he's been good. Like, he's been more comfortable. And again, with Anderson's one of one athleticism. He can afford to make mistakes that a lot of guys can't because he can recover. If he's a step behind, it doesn't really matter as much for him. That still might be a solid play. Whereas if he is not a step behind, that might be an amazing play. So hopefully he can take that step forward and really seize that sort of middle linebacker role and free up Caden Ellis to do more of the blitzing, more of the pass rushing, and give the Falcons that flexibility. That's what they want. Will that happen immediately? I don't know. We're still kind of waiting to see.
All right, and in the secondary, the big signing of Justin Simmons gives the Falcons all of a sudden one of the top safety tandems in the entire league with Bates and Simmons. Might actually even be that already, and I haven't even played it down yet. But that's how significant this one deal could be for the rest of the defense. So what's the one thing Simmons is going to help the Falcons with the most?
I think he's going to take over the box safety duties, and I think he's just going to be a lot more consistent than Richie Grant in that role. I think Justin Simmons, it seemed like last year, like the deep range he had lost a little bit of a step there. He wasn't quite as elite as the single high free safety. But when he played close to the lines of scrimmage, great run defender, really good blitzer, and still just super dangerous in terms of takeaways. I mean, he still had 6 picks last year. This is a guy that, they're probably going to have him roaming that sort of shallow middle area of the field, looking for opportunities to take the ball away and just rushing and blitzing and picking up guys. I think he's much further along mentally than Richie Grant is, and he's a much more opportunistic player. So I think they're hoping Justin Simmons comes in and just gets them takeaways. Like he can just
so you're hoping that he's going to be like one of those hybrid middle of the field playmakers.
Yeah. I think they're not going to ask him to do all of the deep coverage. They'll still rotate and do some interesting things with it, but they're going to let Jesse Bates do what he does, which is sit back there and just take the ball away and erase guys on the back end and not make mistakes, because Jesse Bates so rarely makes coverage mistakes. He knows his stuff. And I think especially with I'm sure we'll get to corner, the possible weakness at cornerback too, they're going to want Bates back there watching whoever is not being covered by AJ Terrell to help eliminate that potential weakness. And again, I think the Simmons thing, the takeaways are going to be huge. I think he's going to be in a situation where they're going to say, you just lurk here and you take the ball away. You just find a way to get your hands on that football and just do what you need to do. And that could be super scary for a lot of teams. Having him allowed to sort of just roam the middle and just take that ball away. We could see a really productive, I think, season from Justin Simmons in that role, which he hasn't really been able to do given what he's had to deal with the last couple of years. I mean, the Broncos defense wasn't terrible, but certainly he had to sort of just carry the back end by himself. And I think now that he doesn't have to be the guy and can actually just do what he does best, I think that's going to help him a lot.
Okay, so now we talked an awful lot about how before the draft, and it was like, well, do the Falcons need a nickel? And you were adamant, no, they don't. It should be D. Alford. I don't even know what we're talking about here. And so I'm guessing that Falcons agree with you that he's the man now. He's going to be the starting nickel. You got Terrell, one of the best in the league. So now you talked about that one position, the number 2 position on the outside. That's the biggest question mark. So is Mike Hughes definitely the starter? Has Clark Phillips made a move at all?
Clark Phillips has been impressive. The team seems to adamant that they want Hughes to get the crack at it. Jerry Gray is an even bigger Mike Hughes fan than me, which is impressive because I mean, UCF legend Mike Hughes. I didn't think anyone could be higher on the guy than I was, but Jerry Gray loves Mike Hughes. He pushed for him to play last year, and I think that was a mistake, having him play over D. Alford in the slot, because Mike Hughes is not a good slot corner. That we have plenty of data on that. Mike Hughes has been actually good as an outside corner in Kansas City. He had an over 70 PFF grade playing outside for the Chiefs in that one season. Now that's one season, so don't get too excited about that. But I think we have a lot more data to suggest that he's a competent outside corner than a slot corner.
Okay.
And if that's the case, he has the better size than Clark Phillips. He is a good run defender out there. So he can match up against more types of receivers easily. And I think they're thinking, Jesse Bates will be behind him, so we'll be okay. If he falters, Clark Phillips, I think, is the better cover corner. I think he's going to create more takeaways if he gets an opportunity, but he's really small. That's just the way it is. I think Clark Phillips, his best case is becoming like a DJ Reed type guy like the Jets, but you kind of have to game plan around having that size in your secondary. And Phillips doesn't like shy away from hits. He just doesn't have the stopping power. And, he's going to be a little bit of a liability in run defense. But again, I think you deal with that because cornerback, the run defense is not the most important thing. Like, it just isn't. So they also have Antonio Hamilton, who played that one preseason game and just dominated, looked like, oh, wow, this is a starter out here playing against backups. He's there. He's been getting a lot of work in the slot. I think they're just trying to have him kind of be the depth guy there. But I think he is, if they need, like if Hughes falters and they don't really want to go to the undersized Clark Phillips, Antonio Hamilton will step in there. We have an entire season of tape on Hamilton playing outside with the Cardinals last year on a really bad defense and looking pretty good. And that's not easy to do on a bad defense. So I think they trust that if anybody falters, they'll put Antonio Hamilton in and it'll be okay.
That makes him the number 3 outside corner then.
I don't know. I mean, yes, right now he's the number 2 slot guy and theoretically the number 3 outside corner, but I wouldn't be shocked if he just gets inserted, like if they need a depth guy. But yeah, I think they really wanted to cross-train him inside so he can sort of be their extra guy no matter what they need. And I think that makes a lot of sense given how experienced he is. He knows how to play outside corner. There's no question. Get him trained up inside. He could be your top depth guy. And yeah, right now I think Clark Phillips is still the number 2 outside or the number 3, outside corner. But yeah, I think they like Antonio Hamilton a lot, and I think he's going to play. You're going to play your depth corners. That happens to everybody.
Oh yeah,
I think they'll be pretty happy with what they get from Antonio Hamilton.
Okay. And by the way, we didn't talk about another injury, and that was to Braylon Trice, one of the rookies. So what's up there? What happened to him?
I believe it was a torn ACL in the preseason game, non-contact, absolutely brutal. A lot of people said that made them trade for Matthew Judon. I think they were probably already eyeing Judon.
I would hope so,
but yeah. I think they pulled the trigger as fast as they could after that, certainly. And yeah, it sucks because I think he was going to play some snaps this year, certainly. Yeah. And yeah, it's just a brutal way to start your career. But I think that's a nice thing with the rookie deal, right? You still got 3 more years after this one on the rookie deal, so he'll have an opportunity again next year, and you certainly hope that he can make the best of it. But yeah, tough loss there, certainly.
Okay. Give me a breakout player on both sides, somebody that hasn't yet either is on the verge of becoming a star, or somebody that is he might even be a second-year player, or a late round rookie. I know you said no college free agents are probably going to make hay so far this year. You did mention Kevin King, somebody that hasn't really done anything yet in the NFL, of course. So I don't know. Give me a breakout player on defense.
I think on defense, I'm going to go with, let's see. Oh, there's so many tempting options here. I mean, I think, we mentioned him earlier. I think D. Alford is going to get to play the whole year finally, and not be taken off for dumb reasons. Like, oh, he's returning punts. He can't also play nickel. That's incorrect. He can also play nickel. But I think D. Alford's going to become a household name at nickel corner in the slot. I think he's really good. I think he's really confident now after a couple years in the NFL. And I think with those 2 safeties behind him, he's going to also be able to just go ham and do what he needs to do back there. I feel as good about D. Alford as I do about AJ Terrell. That's how highly I think of D. Alford. So I think he's a very good player. Obviously slot, they don't get the shine, but I think by the end of the year, we'll be talking about him as one of the NFL's best nickel corners. And then on offense, it's got to be Matthew Bergeron. I think the key to this offensive line taking that next step and becoming like a top 5 unit is Bergeron improving. Like last year, he was a solid left guard as a rookie. That's in itself impressive. He had some bad weeks, had some good weeks, but now like he had to change. He was a tackle. He was a right tackle in college, had to switch to left guard, and predictably ups and downs with that. Now with a year under his belt, I think this is the year that we see Bergeron become a really good left guard. And if he's a good left guard, they've already got Jake Matthews there. They've got Drew Dahlman, who was the NFL's best run blocking center last year. They got Chris Lindstrom, arguably the NFL's best guard. And Caleb McGarry had his best year last year. So this could become the NFL's top 5 offensive line, maybe even challenge for the best offensive line if everything breaks right. And I think Bergeron's a big part of that. And I think this is the year that finally now with the year under his belt at a new position, that he is going to be that guy.
All right, and we'll wrap up with the special teams. So how's the unit looking? Again, a lot of it's going to depend on Avery Williams' health. But if it is a McLeod-Williams tandem there, that looks pretty good. We know the kicking game is there. So in general, how is special teams, or how has it been, and what do you expect them to do this year?
Yeah, Koo missed I think 2 or 3 kicks in the second preseason game, and everyone panicked. And then in practice the next week, he didn't miss a single kick. So it's I'm not panicking about that. If it happens in a regular season game like that, then we're going to be a little bit more concerned.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, Koo will have a game where he misses a couple kicks.
I mean, come on.
It happens to everybody. It happens to every, yes.
Yeah.
It's everybody's oh, he missed some kicks. It's okay, go look at his season long stats. He was still a top 10 kicker. Let's relax. He can't be 96% every single year. That is not possible. Okay.
No.
But I'm not worried there. Bradley Pinion, I think, is a really underrated punter. He was nailing those kickoffs, the new kickoffs. He's had some great punts in the preseason. He's also just huge. I don't know, if you know Bradley Pinion. He's 6'3", 220. This dude is a brick shit house. That's my punter right there. I want this guy going out there and making some special teams tackles.
I like
it. That's just an added bonus. But they seem to have hit on Liam McCullough at the long snapper. They had to kind of scramble, bring in some extra guys after they ended up letting Josh Harris walk, and then the long snapper from the Titans they signed went on season-ending IR, and then Liam McCullough had to step in a couple years ago. He's been rock solid ever since. And then at returner, like you said, it's going to be Ray and Avery Williams. And I think they have some other guys they're open to giving some opportunities there. I think they like what they've seen from those two. So those will be the guys that take the majority of the reps. But if they need extra guys, I know Natrone Brooks, who could be someone who is a sneaky roster candidate. We'll see. He was their extra returner who basically returned everything in the preseason. So I think he's someone they like in that role if they need an extra guy. But I think the idea is that we'll just let Ray McLeod and Avery Williams handle it. And then you got 2 guys. We know, Mike Hughes can theoretically return kicks. I didn't love that last year, but he could do it. And I think that's what they're going to roll with for now. And we'll see if, Kenny Nwangwu from the Vikings. I think they would love to add him. Just get an extra. I think he's probably going to be above Carlos Washington Jr. and Jason McClellan on the running back wants list. So if they can secure him on waivers, I think they'll bring him in with that question, add an extra guy to the room. But yeah, I think they're pretty happy with the way special teams look.
All right. So prediction is going to be that Atlanta's going to win the division, correct? That's going to be your prediction. And then what else are they going to do? Are they going to win a playoff game?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously it depends on who you match up against. You could get really unlucky and, I think there's going to be possibly, you could get the NFC East team that doesn't win the division.
Or the NFC North team that doesn't win the division.
Or the NFC North team. So it's not a given. I think they will probably... I think they have a good chance to win that first preseason game, but after that, it's always a crapshoot. I think if they don't win a postseason game, nobody cares about preseason wins. If they don't win the playoff game, the postseason game, I think people will be disappointed. But again, it's it's the playoffs. It's hard to win. I hope
you got to take a step at a time.
Yeah. But I think it would be disappointing if they don't win at least the first one.
I guess it depends who they play, though.
Yeah, it does. If the 49ers have kind of an off season and somehow don't win the division and they're the wild card team they play, it's great. Yeah. So, it does vary a little bit, but I think my prediction is 11 wins, which I think would be lower than what some people have. I think they're going to have their early struggles and then finish really strong and hopefully ride that into kind of the 2016 method. Of just, a little bit shaky start, then finish really strong, go into the playoffs kind of rolling and hopefully get a couple wins there. And yeah, I think if this team is in the playoffs and winning a playoff game, I think it's absolutely a success. And I know some people are if you're not winning the Super Bowl, it's a waste. No, Like, win some playoff games. Like,
Yeah.
have some fun in your life. You're not going to win the Super Bowl very often. I mean, even the best teams have only won it a handful of times. So if you're Super Bowl or bust, and that's the only way you're going to be happy, you're going to be pretty miserable in the NFL. So.
Absolutely. All right, excellent, Kevin. How excited are you for your dynasty team this year?
It's looking a lot better than it was at the end of last year. And maybe even Justin Fields will actually be a starter again. So there's always that. But no, I pulled off that Herbert trade during the draft. That was huge because otherwise I was going to be really in a bad spot. Pulled off that James Cook trade. I know you helped facilitate that.
Yeah.
I think so that I was in a bad spot at running back too. So I feel a lot better there. And then, the Jalen McMillan pick, which was like the first actual draft pick I made. That's looking like it could pay dividends. I got Puka really late in our startup draft, so that obviously helps a lot. Terry McLaurin maybe on the upswing with Jahan Dotson not there anymore. So it's coming together. So I survived last year despite a really bad situation at running back and quarterback, kind of in the middle of the pack. So I'm hoping maybe I can push for that playoff spot this year, and we'll see what happens.
By the way, just so you know, I guess you know who Wallace Smith is. He's one of your viewers.
Possibly. Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't. Yeah, he might have a different YouTube name. That might be why I don't recognize it. Yeah.
Well, you agree with Wallace?
I mean, it does matter. They obviously should still win, but I think the context of who they play does matter somewhat. Like if they play the Bucks and they're terrible, then yeah, they should absolutely win. If they play the 49ers, who just happened to, finish at like 9 wins because Brock Purdy got hurt for 6 games and they're at full strength going into the play. That's a little bit different, and I wouldn't be as upset. I would still be upset if they lost. I mean, of
course.
But there should be a little. Let's get to the playoffs. Then we can talk about how disappointing it is that they didn't win the game.
I hear you.
Yeah, but yeah, no. I mean, obviously they should win the playoff game. Yeah.
All right, Kevin. I'll look forward to talking to you during the season, and if this is the type of season that we're expecting. Then I'm sure we'll talk a few times, and I'll be looking forward to that. Meanwhile, you can check out the Falcoholic YouTube channel, and you're on there how often?
During the season, it'll probably be 4 times a week. We'll have obviously our Wednesday night live show at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then post-game shows following every game, and then there'll be 2 podcast episodes as well. So
awesome. And you can also, of course, go to thefalcoholic.com. So, Kevin, appreciate it. We'll talk again real soon.